There's a lot of, I would say, as I said, for example, communication, social networks, this is something you have to take care. That's,
Mm,
uh, you can not include it in a PR, but that's something you have to do also,
okay.
really, to build your community, because it's going to be a great asset for your game.
Definitely. All right, cool. Well, I mean, thank you so much for breaking that down because I think it can be helpful. I mean, it might be familiar for some people, but others, it might just be, just I'm going to do PR. But it's like, well, what does that mean? Because without further breaking down, it can make the process potentially overwhelming and such.
And the main problem I face when I'm chatting with indie devs is that they just believe that PR is just sending a press release when they launch a game, and
Mm,
it's so much more. So we'll get back, I suppose, in the conversation, but it needs time to do it the more effectively.
yeah.
And you have strategies, you have contacts. It takes a lot of time. So if there's one thing indie devs should remember is that it needs a lot of time to be effective.
Okay, yeah, that's definitely a good point, and I'm sure we'll dive into that a little bit more too. But yeah, more time to be effective because you don't just like push it out there and then boom, everything's going to happen. We wish that were the
Exactly.
case, but it typically doesn't work that way.
Not.
Awesome. All right, well let's go into this a little bit deeper. And one thing I think is really important too, which we kind of had a good segue there, is discussing what these expectations are with PR and everything else. So, obviously everyone wants press coverage, but there is a
Yeah.
certain time that you should focus. I mean, is there a certain time that you should focus on getting coverage, or approach, or should you just take what you can get? I mean, what's entailed with that?
The thing is, you have to think about PR like any other component of a game. It's a strategy you have to design, and you will, well, eventually it will result in what you were looking for. If you're looking to get the most possible exposure for your game, you have to build it along the time. There's different time you can communicate with the press or influencers. And you really have to tell a story to create your game and your studio are your new brands, and you have to communicate about that.
Mm,
So if you don't have time or money, of course you will just send a press release and well, it's just like rolling a dice. But if you work on that for, I would say the really minimum would be 3 months but almost full time, and the best would be to work on it 6 times to a year at some important phases. The first thing I ask when I talk with indie devs is what is their plan about development? Because PR is really linked to the major steps you have in development. For example, when you're starting a closed beta with some players, this is something newsworthy you can use to warn the press.
mm.
So everything is linked about your development actuality.
Yeah, no, you make some really good points there. And I think I think other names or terms that are used are like, beats, like news beats and things like that.
Yeah, news beta.
Yep. And then also mentioning just simply the fact of time. I mean, you listed out like at minimum 3 months, but as much as like 6 to 12 months. And I think those factors are probably like case by case, but still it's important to kind of have that mindset and knowing like how else, can you, strategize and everything else. So really, kind of hit everything on the head, so to speak, so they're as effective as possible when you go out to, make those promotions, make those announcements and things like that.
Exactly, because if you consider also participating to an event, it's just also PR. So you have to know which events you're going to attend and what are you going to do or to announce maybe. And this is all the schedule of your game development is also linked to that. So you can strategize and say, okay, for this event we're just collecting feedback, but in 6 months after this event and this event, we want to show a new trailer, a new feature, and stuff like that. And that's pure,
Mm. Totally. All right, cool. Well, another thing that I was thinking of too is, um, let's say a game has some great validation from players and fans, like especially if someone who's approached like or has their beta out, right?
Yeah.
But when they get ready to do, they feel good about it. A lot of positive feedback from these players, but then when they go ahead and make outreach efforts to like press and start doing their own PR, they get like minimal, if let's say no response. What do you think might be some of the reasons for this?
Um, could be numerous reasons. First thing, they're not contacting the right person. Well, you really have to consider that gaming journalists get busy days and
Mm.
they get like something 150 mails a day. So if you, first thing is they receive a mail from someone they don't know and the title is not catchy, they will not open it. That's the first thing. So and probably sometimes the line is catchy, but it's for a PC game and you're contacting I don't know someone who specializes in Nintendo Swift games.
Mm.
So it doesn't it's not logical for him to do anything about that. So the first thing is really to know who you're talking to, and that's also one of the reason why you need time because you can do some kind of competition monitoring and see similar games that have been released recently and see who wrote something about them about those games. And then you collect the mails, you contact those journalists, and not everyone. That's the first thing. The second thing is about press release. Most of the time, people don't know how to write. There's two things. There's the structure of the press release that's also meant to facilitate the journalist's life, and there's
Mm.
also the content. And the content, it amazed me when some devs get great games. You look at it and say, "Oh, that's really genius. This thing is good. This thing is good." And when they talk to you about the game, you don't feel the same. You know what I mean?
Mm.
They're too focused about the development, and they don't know how to tell a story about it.
Yeah, that
It's quite surprising.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point. And I think it just says it's not to say that, devs are incapable of doing that or whatever. It's just like you said, they're so involved. And to some respects, they might even have like tunnel vision. They're so focused on the development
Exactly.
or thing where it just can be a challenge sometimes to kind of remove yourself so you can see things at a higher level and then start to begin to maybe talk more clearly in a narrative or just share more about the story of it because they with such detail oriented focus with the development when you're trying to pitch that or convey that to someone else they could get kind of lost in translation, so to speak.
Exactly, and sometimes I'm writing an article at the moment about that. Is that they have what I call a root ID about
Mm.
the games. The reason why they are doing this game, it could be a technical reason, it could be a universe reason, whatever. And along the development, the game is growing up. They're adding features and stuff. Things are moving, and they just don't remember exactly the root ID when you talk to them, and you have to dig with questions to get to that root ID. And this root ID just give you everything you need to really communicate properly about the game most of the time.
Yeah,
Um,
I was just gonna say I really like that approach. It sounds like perfect just to help simplify and get those core ideas out.
yeah,
Awesome.
for example, the game I'm working with, like I love Spirits, but I got other examples. Just like it told me, okay, this is a survival game, and we discussed, and then, well, this is a casual survival games, okay? And the question I ask is, how did you get this ID? And okay, I was playing Oxygen Not Included, And most of the time it's really complicated. And I thought, well, there's a lot of people that don't want complicated games, so they can't play survival games at the moment because they're all complicated in management and so on.
Mm.
So I wanted to do this game and say, okay, that's your tidy, and now I can work on that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, having this concept just basically allows you to kind of like find other areas that can really help with kind of like taking that initial approach, right?
Exactly.
All right, perfect. All right, well, that is a perfect lead into another point that I would like.
Oh,
Yeah.
something else about your original question. If they don't have any visibility on the press, sometimes they just have the bad idea to release the game at the same time of a triple A game,
Oh, okay. Yep. So
and just to focus.
yeah, because sometimes I think emulating others is, can be a good practice, but it depends on how you emulate, and if you are just copying a certain approach, it might not be applicable for your game as it might be for like, a triple A title or something along those lines.
Exactly.
All right, cool. But yeah, I would love to get into approach more too, and because I always feel that taking a certain type of approach, and even possibly different approaches, can really help out with that outcome and who's responding to your inquiries about covering the game and stuff. So, um,
Yeah.
and I guess one area to lead in with this is like, people may think that having a PR campaign is only needed when your game is ready to launch. But are there other stages of development prior to launch where PR can be beneficial? And also, is there a potential that it can help with other objectives opposed to just sales?
Yes, of course. To both questions, actually. I would say having a press campaign only for the release is a bit risky because journalists may not know about you, especially if you're an indie game studio and this is your first game. And having only one mail sent to everywhere, just as I said, it's just about rolling a dice. Even if you just want to focus on the release of the game, nothing, well, it's not, how do you say that? You can easily send a mail 1 month before to announce the release date. And then on the D-Day, you can again send a press release about, hey, we're launching our game today. But the more people see you, see your name, see your game, the more they will tend to look closer at it. That's true for journalists, but that's also true for gamers. There's
Mm.
some kind of marketing that's the seven. What is that? The seven time rules marketing. Let's
Yep.
say, well, people need to see
Oh
your
yeah, how?
product 7 times.
Yeah, like at least 7 times, like touch points or whatever.
Exactly.
Yep.
And that's the same for journalists. If they don't know you, but they receive 100 mails and they get people they already know from a previous mail, they will tend to focus on those mails, so on those games, other games than yours. So you can, even if you want to focus on the press release, which I not recommend, you have other steps before, well, you can do it in two waves, for example. But there's also a lot of time where you can focus on the press, like a year before. Well, if you, for example, today you have a prototype of a game, okay, you know you're estimating your game going to be launched in Q2 2021. Well, you can send a press release and say, okay, this is our game, it's in development, and we plan to release it on Steam, for example, in about a year. Just done. And then a few months later, you're going to do a beta and you want some players. Well, then again, you can do a press release. And if you're winning an award for during a game show, you can also do a press release because that shows that your game is loved by a professional or by the public. And that's a bit interesting. That makes a difference compared to some other games. And
Mm.
even if the journalist is not writing something about your game now, it's sticking in mind. And when the game is more close to the end of the development, he'll have a closer look because he knows that name. He have already seen something about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I think it makes complete sense, and it's probably a good mindset to develop too. Is when you're reaching out to the press, and let's just say you hear cricket